Chapter 10 of The Death of Ivan Ilyitch by Leo Tolstoy. This LibriVox recording is in the public domain. Another fortnight had passed. Ivan Ilyitch could not now get up from the sofa. He did not like lying in bed, and lay on the sofa. And lying almost all the time facing the wall, in loneliness he suffered all the inexplicable agonies, and in loneliness pondered always that inexplicable question, "What is it? Can it be true that it's death?" And an inner voice answered, "Yes, it is true." "Why these agonies?" And a voice answered, "For no reason." Beyond and besides this, there was nothing. From the very beginning of his illness, ever since Ivan Ilyitch first went to the doctor's, his life had been split up into two contradictory moods which were continually alternating. One was despair and the anticipation of an uncomprehended and awful death. The other was hope and an absorbed watching over the actual condition of his body. First there was nothing confronting him but a kidney or intestine which had temporarily declined to perform their duties. Then there was nothing but unknown awful death, which there was no escaping. These two moods had alternated from the very beginning of the illness, but the further the illness progressed, the more doubtful and fantastic became the conception of the kidney, and the more real the sense of approaching death. He had but to reflect on what he had been 3 months before, and what he was now, to reflect how steadily he had been going downhill, for every possibility of hope to be shattered. Of late, in the loneliness in which he found himself, lying with his face to the back of the sofa, a loneliness in the middle of a populous town and of his numerous acquaintances and his family, a loneliness than which none more complete could be found anywhere, not at the bottom of the sea, not deep down in the earth. Of late, in this fearful loneliness, Ivan Ilyitch had lived only in imagination in the past. One by one the pictures of his past rose up before him. It always began from what was nearest in time and went back to the most remote, to childhood, and rested there. If Ivan Ilyitch thought of the stewed prunes that had been offered him for dinner that day, his mind went back to the damp, wrinkled French plum of his childhood, of its peculiar taste and the flow of saliva when the stone was sucked. And along with this memory of a taste, there rose up a whole series of memories of that period: his nurse, his brother, his playthings. "I mustn't, it's too painful," Ivan Ilyitch said to himself, and he brought himself back to the present. The button on the back of the sofa, and the creases in the morocco. Morocco's dear, and doesn't wear well. There was a quarrel over it. But the morocco was different. And different too the quarrel when we tore father's portfolio and were punished, and mamma brought us the tarts. And again his mind rested on his childhood. And again it was painful, and he tried to drive it away and think of something else. And again at that point, together with that chain of associations, quite another chain of memories came into his heart, of how his illness had grown up and become more acute. It was the same there. The further back, the more life there had been. There had been both more that was good in life, and more of life itself. And the two began to melt into one. Just as the pain goes on getting worse and worse, so has my whole life gone on getting worse and worse, he thought. One light spot was there at the back, at the beginning of life, and then it kept getting blacker and blacker, and going faster and faster. In inverse ratio to the square of the distance from death, thought Ivan Ilyitch. And the image of a stone falling downwards with increasing velocity sank into his soul. Life, a series of increasing sufferings, falls more and more swiftly to the end, the most fearful sufferings. I am falling. He shuddered, shifted himself, would have resisted, but he knew beforehand that he could not resist. And again, with eyes weary with gazing at it, but unable not to gaze at what was before him, he stared at the back of the sofa and waited, waited expecting that fearful fall and shock and dissolution. Resistance is impossible, he said to himself. But if one could at least comprehend what it's for! Even that's impossible. It could be explained if one were to say that I hadn't lived as I ought. But that can't be alleged, he said to himself, thinking of all the regularity, correctness, and propriety of his life. That really can't be admitted, he said to himself, his lips smiling ironically, as though someone could see his smile and be deceived by it. No explanation. Agony, death. What for? End of chapter 10, read by Laurianne Walden.